Welcome back to O.R.B.I.T.S Consulting. My name is Manal Zainuddin, Global Education Consultant and founder of O.R.B.I.T.S Development Code, an approach for conscious learning and being. This podcast highlights education communities from macro and micro angles, leadership, learning, personal and professional growth across multiple disciplines. Education is holistic and as vast and infinite as the cosmos. As we bring stories, interviews, talks, projects from around this globe, I extend Plutarch's famous quote that I had posted in the schools I have worked in. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. This is the fourth episode of EduCOVID series, the series that I have been sending throughout my newsletter since the surge of the pandemic. The series incorporated 5 areas of concern, a smart understanding of situation as per country and region, because there are certain differences between countries and regions depending on the demographics and the capabilities, stakeholders collaboration, feedback loops, highly effective teachers, and the need for flexibility. And when all these 5 areas are put together, they form a synergy. By this, we mean the effect is double and even triple. With this focus synergy, there are also 5 other areas that need to go in unison with the synergy. And these 5 areas are accountability, academic achievements and losses, alignment to statement and curriculum, inclusion, and home cooperation. And these 5 areas were very important, and they had to be combined and monitored as educators and leaders planned for strategies to mend and strengthen and foster the path back to stability and growth during those hard times. As school leaders and educators prepare for next year, and we all hope that next year would be much less stressful than this year, I thought to include parts of EduCOVID series in the podcast. Episodes 8, 11, and 12 presented 3 focus urgency areas: accountability, academic achievements and losses, and alignment to standards and school statement. This episode is the 4th of the series, and it presents one of the very important concepts that we all have to foster and implement, which is inclusion. Inclusion means that no one is excluded from a community or an activity. It means not to discriminate people on the basis of age, gender, ethical or social origin, or individual abilities. This means that everyone can participate and yield results through their participation. This means information, means of communication, and education should be accessible to every learner. Through inclusion, we are also fostering diversity and showing it as an enrichment and a strength to our communities. That's how children and adolescents can experience a rich unfolding of their characters and expressions with all the orientation and support that we are giving them. For this to happen, certain plans are needed, mechanisms for communication and interaction between specialist and mainstream provisions to implement and monitor quality inclusive education. So we start with a quick and general checklist about inclusion, and this list covers areas of curriculum, pedagogy, assessment, and social emotional areas. Are we checking with carefulness our name lists and learners' files for academic yearly performance, whether files or folders? Are we checking with carefulness our name lists and learners' files or folders for socioeconomic status to enlist the focus points and work on them throughout the year? Because I've seen it in some schools, certain areas of concern were not noticed. Are we analyzing the way children process information and react to the teaching process from the point of view of home learning, not class learning, especially this year when we had to do online learning as well? Are we working on social and emotional factors? Are we addressing learners with difficulties and special education learners? Are we considering learners in distant and less developed areas? Are we conducting evidence-based inclusion studies in relation to curriculum, pedagogy, assessment, and social emotional education? Are we fully discussing whether inclusion plans match our learning community, mainly by involving specialists? Because specialists here, when it comes to inclusion, are very important to hire in our schools. To what extent are we opening communication paths among all stakeholders? Now, inclusion as a concept is the opposite of categorizing, when the old paradigm was to categorize learners instead of treating all of them with equity and equality. However, in order to practice and embed inclusion, we need to give attention and support to categories. We do not want to disregard or fail to notice anybody. For example, learners who have learning difficulties, talented and gifted learners, learners who feel alienated from the group, learners who struggle with socioeconomic issues, learners who suffer from certain disabilities. We all know that few teachers focus only on certain learners, such as the ones who answer questions quickly or the ones who can successfully draw the teacher's attention, and so on. So for learners who have learning difficulties and physical disabilities, naturally more personalized learning opportunities are needed, such as even having their own journals, sending them extra support sheets, designing a portfolio with some target skills, etc. For learners who are classified as gifted and talented, also personalized learning can be provided, especially that there was lots of intervention taking place in schools during hybrid learning, fully online learning, and that took the opportunities away from the talented and the gifted learners. For learners who feel alienated from the group, teachers need to prepare as many bonding exercises as possible so that they can fit in as much as possible. We know that sometimes certain learners feel better and act better when they are working independently, and that is absolutely okay. But trying to incorporate their tasks within the tasks of another group is also helpful from time to time. For learners who struggle with socioeconomic issues, special care and compassion are needed without casting attention on them in relation to their circumstances. And sometimes this is done unintentionally by certain teachers. Area-targeted coaching sessions, whether it's through group meetings or one-on-one, bringing all those categories together ensures that we have not failed to notice and address anybody, any learner. This is mainly the core of inclusion. So one of the best ways to keep track that we are addressing every learner is that teachers conduct a survey for their learners at the end or beginning of every term. The survey can include questions for feedback and improvement, such as, is the learner excited about the class? Is the learner usually called upon by the teacher? Because sometimes, and I've heard that also from certain learners, that they raise their hands and the teacher does not pick them. And they raise their hand for a couple of minutes and yet they are not picked by the teacher. Can the learner always feel there is something challenging in the class? Are the assignments overloading or suitable for the learner? Does the learner feel comfortable asking questions in or during whole class discussions? Does the learner feel comfortable during pair work or breakout rooms? And sometimes I've also heard that sometimes during breakout rooms, when a group is working, 2 or 3 of the learners start just a kind of chat that is off topic, completely off topic, and one of those learners within that same breakout room has to wait or fails to bring them back to task. And this is frustrating for such learners. Does the learner feel that the grading or scoring is fair and valid, especially during these times? Is the learner given a chance to articulate his or her needs respectively? And what is important is that all learners submit their feedback, not just 10 out of 15 learners, not 20 out of 25. All learners should submit their feedback, and we explain to them why we need this feedback, and that the analysis of the survey and action steps are planned accordingly. Inclusive education is mainly a broad spectrum of strategies and tools that are based on knowledge, based on appropriation, on the expertise of educators and the cooperation of educators, and all these should come together. For example, one of the strategies is differentiation. And differentiation is very supportive to meet all learners at a point of their needs. This requires effort from teachers, both cognitively and creatively, but it allows for new experiences and more solid attainment. And some quick strategies for differentiation. For example, using Excel sheets, matching previous records of readiness, individual competencies, interests, and profiles to the classwork, and it can be a quick and efficient way in structuring lessons. Any type of selection that learners can do from an object such as a basket, a box, beads, or virtually such as menu, a checklist, or whatever it could be, handling an object of choice serves to foster learner preferences and consequently results in full engagement. And we all know that true and effective learning is mainly engagement. During group work or Zoom breakout rooms, learners rotate to handle tasks such as note-taking, reporting, editing, timekeeping, and additional tasks if deemed necessary. Using the jigsaw model, learners can work in various groups or pairs at different levels of difficulty until they finish their tasks. Pablo Picasso says, "The chief enemy of creativity is good sense," and good between quotations. By that we mean keeping paths for creativity open. Accepting various forms of learner intervention should not be a threat to the teaching experience, and I have seen that in many classes. It is advised that teachers allow in certain situations some actions that may not be related to the session itself. Now, this demands dexterity and a sense of wit from the teacher as to know what could add to the class discussion or the general path for learning. For example, if a learner asks a question that is seen far from the session or not related to the session, redirecting it to the session is much smarter than just stopping the child from speaking. Another example is if a child uses technology at a certain moment that is not as expected, in other words, might be outside the box, such as doodling on the virtual whiteboard or asking to go to the breakout rooms, letting such things happen and investing in the learner's sense of curiosity may serve the lesson rather than just disrupt it. So if we think of attention grabbers, the tools that we can use to ensure inclusion. For example, before classes, we can always send or use calendars and reminders available on the digital platforms. So we always expect that the learner might forget schedules or assignments. Now, I hope after a year and a half of hybrid learning and online learning, children and adolescents are used to the system or the policy within a school. Using timers at the beginning and middle will ensure engagement since it urges action. Using movement during online learning is necessary, especially with children. Asking children to stand up, juggle, dance, or even bring things to show through the screen, play certain movement games, and anything that can be considered a brain break. All these are important. Positive narration strategy attracts the attention of the one who is not yet doing the task by addressing two who are already doing the task and addressing the one who is not. For example, someone is still getting his notebook or whatever that could be. A teacher can draw the attention in an indirect way. I use that a lot in my classes. And I think the best way to make this learner who is not engaged or not interested, to bring him back on task again, is to engage the others. When you engage the others, this person will find himself all alone, and when he sees something interesting, he would really step in to take part of that activity. Interactive Google Slides, for example, induce using choice words that keep learners engaged, and many teachers around the world have used that during the past year and a half. Grabbing attention does not always have to be through videos. Sometimes audio helps as much, and we have seen how Screencastify helped. It had that option to use audio only, and I'm sure there are other apps that provide the same service. Groupings, for example, Group interview switch is a very helpful strategy also, in which learners are divided into groups such as group A, B, or C, and then they are given a task that is based on questioning, and then they switch. This is an excellent strategy for building prior knowledge section of the lesson, and this way all learners will have the opportunity to take part in the activity. Another tool, for example, is the 1-minute video, and those were very helpful to wrap up a lesson or pinpoint key statements. helping learners who are reluctant to ask questions or those who find it difficult to reorganize the ideas after lessons. Now, this is not always easy to be done by teachers, but it proved to be a very effective and quick way to just wrap up the lesson. Some teachers chose social media to post those videos. Others preferred to post them on their own platforms, but both ways, all learners can find ongoing support through such videos. And that's a very good tool for inclusion. Another tool is using the activity menus, and the activity menus can be applied in many subjects. And selecting readily designed or creating your own, it doesn't matter as long as there is this option for the students. Video choices, by that we mean showing learners a video and asking them to select one theme or idea and elaborate in the way they desire, whether it's art or mathematics or sciences. And by this we are targeting different preferences in the class, and this also incorporates all preferences and all interests of learners. Club clusters, for example, when we ask learners to select a subject, theme, or idea and even hold a show about it, whether it's through a podcast or a TV show or any kind of recording, but this makes learning more exciting. Another tool, for example, is rotating schedules when all learners get to perform tasks for the class, giving each a sense of responsibility, freedom, and ownership. And there are specific digital tools that can help through the rotating schedules. Fist to 5 check is another quick method to check understanding. It can be a chart in the class or used as reference during online learning. By raising their hands with a certain number of fingers, showing whether 5 or 4, 3, 2, or 1, or just 0 with the fist, teachers can have a quick notice that can embrace all learners and none is left unnoticed. And again, the main target here is inclusion. There are strategies that help fuel caring and compassion, and that's the other side. This is the non-academic side. For example, with what we called air greetings, these were very loving gestures from both teachers and learners during in-person classes. And that's when the teachers and learners design a way to greet each other at the entrance of the classrooms. For example, clapping hands and thighs, hands, hugs without touching. We have seen so many nice videos online picturing this kind of strategy. This way, every child feels that there is a physical and heart connection between the learner and the teacher. It's a kind of a mirror exercise. One more thing is the virtual hugs or even the self-hugs when learning in person. They are highly recommended from time to time so that all learners feel that adults in this case, and in this case, their teachers have never lost that touch of compassion, understanding, and attention with social distancing procedures, because social distancing has been really detrimental when it came to social and emotional education and being. Many children are not often hugged at home due to a variety of reasons, and some teachers may not even notice that, but some children do yearn for a hug from a teacher or another learner in the class. Summing up this episode with this short checklist. As schools end this academic year, it is necessary to evaluate carefully the inclusion policies. And as they prepare for next year, this can help in their preparation. Where policies clear about age, gender, ethnic, and social background, along with individual abilities and difficulties in learning, were those policies well implemented and to what extent during the pandemic? In other words, testing our inclusion plans before adopting them. Was the right professional development for inclusion provided efficiently so that we do not put teachers under the pressures of frustration? Were opponents of the inclusion concept, and there are always opponents of the inclusion concept because inclusion is difficult to achieve and also it sounds illogical to few educators, unfortunately. So were those opponents of the inclusion concept, such as those having difficulty of handling serious cases and considering them hindrance to class learning, were they being addressed and assisted to create those bridges? What modifications need to be done for the upcoming year? And this involves transparency and authenticity. What intervention or enriching programs can be implemented? And we always talk about enrichment programs. Ending this episode before the last of EduCOVID series, I encourage you to stay tuned for the next and the last episode, Home Cooperation. Let's nurture conscious learning and being. Ending our episode with the open-ended question for all of us to ponder. By inclusion, are we helping every child and adolescent, or are we also helping ourselves?